Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. I'm your host, Swire Ho, the promo guy. Today, I'm very happy to speak to a pro. Her name is Jodi Krangle. She's a voice actor, podcast host of the audio branding podcast. Jodi has been a voice actor since 2007 and has worked with clients from all major brands all over the world. She's also a singer and put on her own album of jazz, blues, and traditional tunes. Over the years and doing what she does, she learned a lot about sound and how it influenced people. I'm going to let Jodi to talk about herself, and you'll be in for a treat by listening to her speak about audio branding. How you doing, Jodi?
I'm doing well, Swire. How are you?
Good, good. Please do tell us about your journey. You obviously a pro, using a voice, being an actor, a singer, and then you're also a podcast host. Can you let us know more about what you did and why did you get into this industry?
Voice and sound has always been a part of my life, just pretty much from day one. My parents were very musical. My sister is musical. So, it's always been a part of our family dynamic, and I grew up with it. So, I've always really had a love of sound in general, and speaking is a part of that. So it took me a while to get here, actually, because I was doing internet marketing and SEO back in 1995 when the internet was still a young place. And it was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it. But then Google became the only game in town and I got kind of bored. And as those who know me know, things happen when I get bored. And I tend to go off in completely different directions. And I had had a little bit of a taste of voice acting from volunteering my time at the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, from 1995 to 96. And I'd really enjoyed it and didn't really know that voice acting was a thing until around that time. It just needed some time to percolate. So when I got bored in 2007, I kind of thought to myself, now is the time. I'm going to do it. And I went online because that's the way that I do things. I've always gone online. I've never been, seeking out local. Just for some reason, I always went to the internet. That was my go to. So I went to the internet, I looked up things, I found a message board of all things. This was 2007, so still fairly early on. And basically in 2008, I put out my first demos. And in, 2.5 years or so, I was making the same kind of money I'd been making in internet marketing. So not looking back.
That's very interesting. I now have a story to tell people that a contact of mine started her entrepreneurial journey because she got bored.
Well, I was already an entrepreneur because I was already self employed. By the time 2007 rolled around, I had been self employed since probably 1999.
Hmm.
And before that, I was telecommuting. I was working with people who were completely not in my area. One was in LA and one was in Germany.
Wow,
So I have been doing this whole working from home thing for a really long time.
that's good to
And
know.
yeah, by the time I switched my focus in 2007, it was really just a switch of focus. I was already at home as an entrepreneur, as a small business, doing my own thing. So really, I just had to switch my focus of what I was going to be making a living at.
Yeah, I want to dig deeper. Your podcast is called Audio Branding Podcast, and one of the things that you talk about a lot is the concept for audio branding. So let us know more because everyone knows the importance for video marketing. We also touch on SEO a lot on the show, and we also talk about social media marketing. So I don't think we do touch on audio branding a lot. Can you let us know more about what the concept is and what does it really do and what needs to be involved?
Well, audio branding is a very large umbrella. So it has to do with audio logos. It has to do, they call them ear cons. There's all sorts of things that involves. It involves the music, it involves the voice you use, it involves the sound effects. In a car, it can involve the way that a car door sounds when it slams. It can be the beeps on a GE kettle. It really can be a whole bunch of different things that encompass what that company is, what it provides, who they are, what their DNA is. And it's meant to evoke emotion. And I liken this to when you're watching a movie. If you're watching a movie and you turn the sound off, you'll get an idea of what that movie is about, but you won't care. That's the difference. That's what audio does. It makes you care because it reaches us emotionally. That's how we make business decisions. That's how we make buying decisions emotionally. We don't make them logically. we may think we do, but we really don't. So, a lot of the idea of video is fantastic, but it also doesn't quite get to the meat of the matter, and that is that if video is halfway decent and the sound is fantastic, people will continue to watch.
Hmm.
If the video is fantastic, but the sound is off or bad or grainy or like not really sounding good, just bad quality, people will tune out way before they will tune out if the video is bad. So and this is actually a study they did on YouTube. And I can't remember the name of the study. I think it was done in like 2012 or something like that. Like it was pretty substantial, and I think it's actually behind a paywall right now, but but it is actually a study that they've done, and it's one of those things where our ears are so sensitive to this kind of thing that we can't listen to bad sound for too long. Having video is great, don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic, but if you don't pair that with good audio, you're missing out on the point.
That's very interesting, especially when you point out about movie, think about, all of us think about, let's say a war movie, right? There are, cannons going on. It's the final fight scene, for the movie. There's no sound, or you turn it way down. It won't be as dramatic, as it will be if you have the good sound system, all the sound effects are right.
Yeah.
And especially you're right on YouTube, if I see videos that are going on, and if the sound is off, then you say, what's going on? Then you notice right away. Then if you have good sound, but then the video quality is not as good, then you're right. You're more accommodating to sit through it a little longer than if the sound is way off.
Yeah, I think our ears experience fatigue a lot more quickly than our eyes do. And yeah, it's one of those things, and maybe it's because I am very focused on the sound. I can't listen to bad sound for very long. A couple of seconds really is all I can handle. So, that has to do with just about anything, a commercial, podcast, even someone in a clubhouse room. If their audio is so super bad, it's hard for me to pay attention.
So in terms of things that we talk about, strengths, facts about sound, right? Um, when it comes to a business, what are some of the things that you have seen that most people don't notice about?
Well, actually, a lot of this I got from Steve Keller, who is the Sonic Strategy Director over at SXM Media, which is SiriusXM and Pandora and Stitcher and all of that. And they have an advertising agency called Studio Resonate, and they've done a lot of experiments on this. So before the pandemic, in the before times, they did a DJ station for a drink called Propel, and it's an electrolyte Gatorade like drink. And they put people at DJ stations, gave them a sample of the drink, and allowed them to listen to music sounds in headphones and sort of from an iPad dial in how much sweet or salty they wanted the drink to be.
Wow.
So you could actually change the way you perceived taste by what you were hearing. There's a lot of really interesting research in multisensory experiences and how they affect things. So if you're sitting in a restaurant, for instance, the music that you hear can make you experience the food as tasting better or not so great. There are ways that you can dial in things like the crunch of a particular dish. You can play a certain sound or a certain type of music, and you can experience that as more crunchy. And there's sort of ways to do this, and using them in an interesting fashion to sort of play with our strange experience of our senses.
Yeah, I think that also be a good example for when we go to museum or places with the audio tour. without that, you're looking at something, maybe artifacts. Sometimes you go like a broken house, right? But then if you put on your headphones with the audio's experience, then they tell you about the stories. If they're good, they might have sound, so you actually drawn into it. And always make the joke. If at some point they say, if you see a cliff, the audio said, go down the cliff now, then some people might. So it's very powerful. Audios can lead us to a different journey than most people would think.
It really is. And there's something else that can be done about this as well, especially if you're talking about things like a grocery store, for instance. If you're standing on a particular spot, then that spot may trigger an audio that tells you about the produce that's in front of you. Or, I think Steve mentioned this happening in front of a banana stand. So you would be standing on a particular spot on the floor, and then you'd hear explanation about the banana and the plantation or whatever where they got this banana, and then smell of banana coming at you like at the same time. So it's like this multi-sensory experience just by standing on a spot. And if you're talking about a museum, again, if you're standing on a particular spot, rather than needing to have headphones, they can direct the audio right at you, and
Mm.
you can experience it that way. That's how they're starting to do things now. So it's becoming much more of an experience as opposed to needing to put on, extra stuff.
Yeah, and also want to get your take on that, because recently I noticing more brand started to put their instructional manual with audio format, because whenever you buy something, there's like a 300 pages manual, and you're not going to really read that. Some of us will go to like YouTube and other channel to watch how to use the gadget that we just purchased. But then recently I have the experience that to put on an audio menu. So while I'm fidgeting with the new gadget, someone is guiding me along, and then they obviously have planned it, so they know that it will take me 5 seconds to open that button, and then to go to the next step. So do you think that's another best use for sound, and do you see more people in the industry requiring that to happen?
I do, actually. I think it's a great way to do things. The reason why sound is so effective this way is because it fits into all those little extra spaces in our lives, right? Like, that's why people listen to podcasts, because they can listen to a podcast while they're taking a walk or walking the dog or doing the dishes or, all these other things, or commuting to work. Anything that they want to do, this podcast, this audio can fit into their lives, as opposed to us needing to make a space for it, you know? And I think that people are much more jealous of their time these days, because after all of this pandemic stuff, I think we're all starting to understand that our time is precious, and we need to use it in ways that are efficient for us, not necessarily for the brand. You know what I mean? So we're forcing companies to adapt to us. And it's kind of an interesting aspect of this, that we're now in an age where we can instruct the tech through our voices, as opposed to having to touch or type anything. So the tech is starting to adapt to the way that we naturally operate, as opposed to us having to adapt to it. So it's like this really interesting evolution, I guess. We started with none of it. We created it. We made it so that we had to type or swipe or do something to manipulate it. And then as we got better with the tech, it adapted. We made sure that it adapted to us. So now we're in an age where we can instruct things with just the use of our voice. And that is our natural way of doing things.
Okay. So you're talking about, the concept that I think it's easy to understand, right? But then we don't think about it. And then you're right to hit on the point that it's there's a lot of noise out there. As when you're in marketing, branding, and advertising, you actually battle for people's time, right? And then I think about my recent experience, I like to do gardening. So obviously, I can't be looking at a video and I can't be watching YouTube videos, but then
Sure.
I
Yeah.
always pick something that I wanted to listen to,
Hmm.
right? When I'm doing gardening, I'm just, doing with my hands, but then my ears and minds are pretty much open. So I put on a podcast, or if I wanted to learn something, that's the perfect time that I have. I think uh, if you're a company, I've talked to enough people, they want to put up blogs, right? So, but obviously when people are traveling, when I'm gardening, I can be reading blogs. But uh, you think there is a space for putting blogs actually in an audio format so people can consume it in a different way?
Oh, definitely. I think there is. Yeah. In fact, that's kind of how I do some of my own individual podcasts. When I'm not interviewing someone, I basically write a blog and then speak it into my podcast. So, I'm used to doing that because I'm okay with reading a script and making it sound like I'm not reading, because that's what I do. But, not everyone is going to be that comfortable with it. But at the same time, if you're comfortable with just speaking off the cuff, then you could take that, transcribe it, make it into a blog. So, either way around. There's all sorts of ways to approach this. But I do think that giving an audio option is a really good way to do this. And you don't necessarily have to speak it yourself or hire a voice actor. A lot of synthetic voice can be created for that very purpose, where you can take a synthetic voice, get a subscription, and have it only, click to read this or click to hear the audio only when someone wants to. So they can decide if they want to hear it as opposed to reading it. Or they could do both at the same time. Some people do that. So there's all sorts of ways to do this. I think it's just, and also that makes it more approachable for people who are blind, for instance.
Hmm.
So accessibility becomes better. And there's all sorts of reasons to do that. But yeah, having more than one way for your content to be experienced is a good thing.
Yeah, because people will do video marketing when they will do blog, but then think about like you said, have your blogs available, but then you have an audio option. Maybe they're busy, or they don't want to, people don't like to read really. But then if you hear it on the background, when I work, I'm kind of like multitasking person. I'll play something, I'm not really looking at it, but then I'm
Hmm.
listening to what the person is saying, so I am taking in information. And for audio podcasts and YouTube videos that I do, I actually act on some of their recommendations, right? Sometimes they are, they have, obviously they have their, maybe merchandise to sell. I am picking up on it. So, wanted to ask you deeper into that question. You mentioned, obviously as a small business personnel, we think we are the face of our business. So
Mm.
obviously we're not a pro, right? We don't have the voice that you have. So how would you advise us, when should we speak, ourselves, than to hire a professional like yourself to speak on behalf of, the content?
I think it depends on what kind of a business you have. If you're a coach, for instance, you need to know how to speak.
Mhm.
That's just a given. So if you don't know how to speak, then you probably shouldn't be a coach, is all I have to say. I mean, honestly. So I would say those who are coaches, do your own stuff because you are the face and the voice and the sound of your business. That's who people are paying for. So they don't want to hear someone else. Now, again, you can up the professional of your podcast or your whatever it is you're putting out there in audio format by getting some professional help. I'm not saying you should never do that. But yeah, it does raise the professional level a little bit to get a professional to help you with the intro and outro to your podcast, for instance, with the music that you're using on your videos, or the voiceover that you're using on your videos, or whatever that happens to be. It depends on what you're putting together. But I would say that you need to know what your audio DNA is as much as your visual one. Because if you're not aware of what your visual colors, your logo, what the feel of the font that you're using is, if you're not aware of why you did that, it's going to be really hard for you to come up with an audio equivalent. And you really do need to come up with an audio equivalent because you need to match those. If they don't match, there's like a subconscious kind of like people aren't going to trust you because they don't think you know who you are.
I think that's important. And obviously, it ties on to the branding. It's something that if you're not in marketing, or if you're just like a regular person, when you see a company's logo, or when you see, touching my industry, when you see a promo item, or when you hear specific podcasts or audios that are done for the company, you might not know all the technical details, what microphone they use, what actor that they pick, but then you can hear right away. You could get a sense of, do I like this, or do you think oh, it sounded really good, right? Or wow, why does it sound like that? Are they hiding in a cave, or what are they doing? So you have quick judgment like that.
Yeah.
Even with someone who have no experience in audio or video at all, they could tell right away if it's just good production, or something that is just an afterthought for putting the audio. And I think most people, uh, businesses included, not paying as much attention as they would in audio when compared to other channels that are available.
Yeah, it's one of those things that really does need to be paid a lot more attention to because the audio is our emotional context. It hits us hard and fast, and if you make a bad impression in that first few moments of people hearing you, it's going to be hard to recover.
Yeah. I Jody, I want to ask you this question, and it's kind of like a big question, but you talk to a lot of professional in your industry, and you
Mhm.
obviously have a podcast of yourself. What are some of the best uses of sound in marketing that you can share with us?
There are a bunch of them. Uh, there's I actually link to a few of them in awards shows at ad like commercials and such. They have their own ad contests, I guess. And some of the best ones are amazing sound wise. Also, the International Sound Awards links to a bunch of these. And there's so much that can be done with this. If you're thinking about, for instance, hospitals, there's a hospital in Helsinki, a children's hospital in Helsinki, that has divided up each floor based on what environment it is. So it starts at the sea, and then it goes to the beach, and then it goes to a field, and then it goes to the forest, and then it goes to the sky, and then it goes to space. And this is like a fantastic environment for a kid to be in. They're there for reasons they don't want to be there. I don't blame them at all. But if the sound around you is more relaxing than tense, than stressful, it's going to help your recovery levels on a lot of levels. I have a podcast episode coming up with a fellow who talks about the sounds in hospitals
Hmm.
and how we are hurting ourselves and how quickly we can recover from whatever we're in the hospital for because of all the beeps and alarms and all of the
Right.
things that
Yeah.
are, yeah, it's awful.
It's scary.
Yeah. And very scary. Exactly. Very stressful. So if we can just take those really harsh beeps and give them a little bit of decay, and what I mean by that is like the echo at the end, instead of just having it stop, because it's a machine, right? Like it's just like stops the sound. It's very harsh on our ears. If we just took that and gave it a little bit of a sort of fade at the end, it would be a lot less stressful on our ears. Just simple things like that. And when you're talking about marketing, actual marketing, there are things being done in dynamic sound. For instance, there's an app, a running or a walking app, where if you put it on your phone, it has a piece of music that it's playing while you're walking, and then if you increase your pace, the music speeds up at the same time. So it just increases your ability or your want to move. It helps you get more into the faster pace because the music has matched you. So it's really interesting, and video games started that from long ago. When the first video games were on, they would give you different music for each level. Or if you were fighting a boss, you'd get a different type of music, right? Like there's all sorts of ways that music enhances and makes our lives better. And we need to be thinking of that when we're putting marketing campaigns, advertising campaigns together, because all of this works together to make an appealing final product. And if you're not using all of our senses, you're not really reaching people as deeply as you could.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we could touch on. For example, we still listen to radio, right? When we commute,
Sure.
or we want to listen to our favorite DJ. But when you listen to radio, you have ads, right? So some ads that you could tell right away, it's not is it not the thought. But then you also have very catchy, sometimes cheesy
Hmm.
jingle of, let's say, a personal injury attorney.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can tell you that my kids know all those songs, right? When the
Jingles are
song, like
so
when the melody
memorable.
comes out, they know, oh, it's just, who so and so, right? Personal
Yeah.
how that's a bit business. You can actually take advantage of that. This is not very difficult. I don't think it's like a super high multi-million dollar budget, but then obviously they
Yeah.
give us some thought into it. They know that people who are in that particular space will respond to that better. But maybe visually you got to do it differently. But I think it's just like your background with SEO and search engine marketing, you can't put the same ad on Facebook than you will put it on LinkedIn and Instagram, for example.
Hmm.
So for the campaign that you do, you might have to think it differently when you put it on video and you put it on audio only format. There are senses, right, that are not available, but then there are senses that are really enhanced. If you're listening, then obviously your listening senses is a lot higher than you're not really looking, right? There's nothing to look at sometimes.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a good marketer, think about that and to enhance it? But I think it's just another way that we have to think about when we do market. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish?
Sure. Well, you're telling a story when it's only audio. You have to tell a story in the theater of the mind. So it's a bit of a different thing as opposed to having visuals to sort of have. For instance, when I do my voiceover work is very different between television and radio, or between television and digital, anything digital, streaming media. I will say that SiriusXM really has this pretty figured out. If
Mhm.
you're listening to SiriusXM in your car, first of all, the sound design on all of their ads are fantastic. Generally, if the Studio Resonate people got a hold of it, then that audio is pristine. It's really good. But also, they've started using dynamic ads. So if you're listening to SiriusXM in your car in Ohio somewhere, Cleveland, let's say, yeah, like Cleveland, then your messages are going to be targeted towards where you are.
Mhm.
And they can also target them towards the time of day that you're listening. So if it's an ad about, for instance, like a convenience store or something that's with a gas station. Those ones that we all have at the gas stations. There's different names. Whoops, different names for all of those, and that those different types of places will have different specials on at morning, afternoon, evening, and they'll have different reasons why people would go to them. You're ordering breakfast in the morning. You're not ordering dinner,
Yeah,
or
that's amazing. And then obviously we could target you for fast food, right?
yeah, there's
It's 4:30. They could probably know if you're traveling, right?
yeah.
And it's kind of evil, but then you could say, stop by and come eat with us.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you could say that someone would want to do in the morning as opposed to before they get home at night. And so there's a different type of enticement to drop by that business. And they will target that to the the time of day and what someone might be interested in at that time of day. So there's a lot more dynamic ads going on these days than there ever used to be, and it's becoming a big business.
Yeah, I like that. I want to ask you more about that. So you mentioned the dynamic ad, so that's very interesting. What else do you see that is new for 2022 in audio branding?
I think that people, authenticity has been this really big buzzword for a
Mhm.
couple of years now, more than a couple of years, but it should be for more than a couple of years. And I think that one of those ways that people are authentically making connections with their clients, their customers, their audience is through sound. And one of the ways that I've seen that happening on a more consistent basis is actually through social audio like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. And I think Facebook has created new rooms that you can open up and all sorts of ways that people can connect with each other without video, things that are specifically audio oriented. And I think that it's a really good way to do it because it's a lot less pressure. Especially, let me just put this out there. People may disagree with me, but as a woman, I don't like being on video unless I have at least brushed my hair, like these kinds of things, right? Like it's a concern. So if you don't have to worry about that, it's a lot less stressful. I mean, I know women who, before they get on a video call, they'll like go to a hairdresser. Like it's a big
Well,
deal.
luckily I don't have that problem, right? It's just
Yeah.
I just roll out of bed like that.
But it can become stressful. And so one of the reasons why social audio is so much of an easier prospect is because it doesn't have the video. And yet, when you speak with someone, you're getting that intimacy, that authenticity that you really don't get in a lot of other ways. And especially now when a lot of us are separated because of this whole pandemic thing, and can't visit each other in person, and the world is becoming a much smaller place. You can Zoom anyone, anywhere. So it's just more of a deeper connection that we can have by hearing each other's voices as opposed to worrying about other stuff. So I think that the voices that we use are going to become very important when it comes to advertising, when it comes to anything, because those voices need to convey authenticity. They need to actually show people in general who you are as a company, as some kind of person. Who are you trying to reach? Who is your stuff for? And who is it not for? These things are going to be told through the human voice.
Yeah, I would agree that, if you are doing an audio format, at some point you get more intimate, right? Then if I put a camera and like all the likes right in front of your face, then you are kind of putting on a defensive mode. You might not share as much if I, let's say, you're at your comfort of whatever spot that you are. All you need is a microphone, maybe a headphone. Then you start sharing the information. That's why when we do podcasts, sometimes we get to the end, we can share more information and we go deeper in terms of it. A very good example, and a lot of us know, if you're a celebrity now, you got to have a podcast. Even President Obama and Michelle Obama, they all have their own podcasts, and I think you can tell more about a person by listening to them talk, and then I think they would share more information than if you would do like a video interview. So I think, you know, but it's kind of scary, right? You talk about authenticity. We don't how authentic do we want to be? Like we kind of concerned about our privacy, but then in terms of a business, we do wanted to know, and before we work with a company, what their value is like. Who are we working with? And then as a salesperson, I will even throw it out there. uh, you can work with everybody, right? And then if you knowing that as a focus, and you can actually use your voice to filter down that people who never order from you.
Yeah.
Maybe someone out there and listening to my voice, I would never work with this guy. And I'm fine with that. Then that's why I'm putting my voice out there. People know this is how I sound.
Hmm.
So when they actually call me, oh, it's this guy again. I know his voice, right? So I think that might be an advantage, right, to your small business if you're thinking about doing most of the thing and you are the face of your business and you also are the voice of your business. People calling and they actually want to talk to you. They don't want to because people work with small business because they want to be they like your value, they like
Hmm.
you, right? And they like your voice. They don't want to talk to a machine. So, are there ways that with this episode that you we can encourage you to think about, putting yourself out there, putting your voice out there to your own advantage? So, I think that's the message I want to push across.
Sure, yeah. And there's something to be said for vulnerability. Brene Brown talks a lot about this. Vulnerability makes us more relatable. And if you are being authentic, you are in a sense being vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there for criticism if people are going to have that. And you just have to be comfortable with yourself and know who you are and put that out into the world. And the people who are attracted to that will be attracted, and the people who are repelled will be repelled. And those people who are repelled are not your people.
Right.
That's it.
Jody, this is a fun conversation. If a listener and viewer wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, what would be the best way?
Well, my voiceover website, if anyone happens to need voiceovers, is at voiceoversandvocals.com. And I also have the podcast off of that. But the audio branding podcast is at audiobrandingpodcast.com. Pretty simple. I also do have Clubhouse chats regularly on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I talk about all things sound. So the club is called The Power of Sound. And we've talked about things from audio NFTs to voice AI to voiceovers to storytelling, public speaking, music, podcasting, all sorts of interesting things having to do with sound. And I do that on a weekly basis.
Thank you so much, Jody. I learned a lot from you today.
Thanks. Appreciate your having me here.